Hi friends, welcome back to my booktube channel. I am Taylor and today I'm going to be sharing my top 10 books of 2020. Whew, I feel like that's so hard to say. I feel like I read so many fantastic books this year and I just can't talk about all of them, otherwise this video would be hours and hours long. So I narrowed it down to 10 of my favorite books of 2020 and I can't wait to share them with you. So let's get started. Coming in at number 10 is The Grace Year by Kim Liggett, which is a dystopian-esque book where the girls really, when they're 16, they go away for a grace year and nobody really knows what happens in the grace year. Even though the women come back, most of the women come back, they're not allowed to talk about what happens during their year away. So in the grace year we follow Tierney, who is 16, so it is her turn for the grace year, and she's very curious, trying to get answers from her mother and her older sister. She knows that every year these girls, not all of them come back, and the ones that do come back looking and feeling very defeated. And it's a struggle. So we get to follow her and the 4 seasons while she is in her own grace year and sort of what happens when she is in this secluded enclosure with all these other girls. And yeah, it was fantastic. All the women power and definitely had some disturbing parts because like I said, it was kind of Hunger Games-ish, and yeah, but this book is phenomenal. I read it in January and I'm still thinking about it, so take that for what you will. Right, and coming in at number 9 is The Black Flamingo by Addie. Oh, friends, I read this book in one sitting, which first of all doesn't happen very often because I have a toddler. And second of all, it is written in verse, which I think helped reading it in one sitting. But The Black Flamingo follows a black boy, Michael, who is trying to figure out his identity and place in the world as a black gay man. And this story was so touching and so beautiful, and I love that it was told in verse. It was just fantastic, utterly fantastic. Highly recommend. Apparently that's all I could say. I loved it, highly recommend it. That's all I could say about it right now. But yeah, this book, it flows so well. The writing is fantastic. I cannot wait to see more from Addie. It's just a great novel. And coming in at number 8 is What I Like About You by Marissa Cantor. So this is a YA contemporary that follows Hallie, I think that is how you say her name, and she goes to live with her grandfather for a year while her parents are sort of doing their TV show work thing. I think that's what they do now, I can't remember. But Hallie is a very big book influencer, book blogger, very popular on Twitter. So many people know about her, but she sort of has this fake identity online, and then she moves in with her grandfather and meets her online crush, Nash. And so it's sort of like a You've Got Mail type situation because she still talks to him, but she doesn't tell him who she is, and then she starts to fall for him in real life. Lots of complications, you know? It's so fun. It has all the quirky fun romance that you love in YA contemporary, and it has all the bookish nerd feelings that I feel like a lot of us have as booktubers or book bloggers or bookstagrammers, just being a part of the online book world. I feel like this book brought that to life in a really beautiful way, and it was just so much fun to read. Alright, coming in at number 7 is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I read this book in November, so it was in my November wrap-up. And this book, I feel like is probably one of the books that surprised me the most in 2020. I saw it all over Bookstagram and I was like, I don't know if I want to read that. And then I picked it up earlier this summer, and it is a very much a slow burn book, and I was like, I want something quick and fast and fun. And it was fun and beautiful, but it is not fast. And I feel like so many reviews that I saw was like, this book is like a warm hug, that like it just is a warm hug. And I was like, what does that even mean? And then I read it and I was like, oh, it's like a warm hug. But the house in the Cerulean Sea follows Linus, who is a caseworker for the Department of Magical Youth, and he goes from orphanage to orphanage that are homes to these magical children who basically aren't really allowed in society. And then one day he gets a very peculiar assignment to go to this island, to this orphanage where there are kids that he's never seen abilities like what they have before. And it's just all about like acceptance and finding real beauty in life and not just going through the mundane motions of day to day, because there's so much more. And yeah, this book is lovely and like a warm hug, and everyone should read it. That is all. Coming in at number 6 is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer, I think is how you say the last name. I have read several books by this author before. This is her first fantasy novel, and this is more of an, I want to say an urban fantasy, but I guess I don't even know if it is an urban fantasy, but it is essentially a Beauty and the Beast retelling that follows Harper, who is taken into this magical world where they have been cursed. Obviously, Beauty and the Beast retelling, and they relive the same season over and over and over as they take women or girls from the mortal world to try and fall in love with the prince. Classic Beauty and the Beast retelling, but this book has like so much more. I just loved everything about it. Like, how do I even I'm struggling with words today, but I feel like this book is much more than your average retelling of Beauty and the Beast. So I love the representation. In A Curse So Dark and Lonely, Harper has cerebral palsy. Wow, I am struggling to talk today. But so there is that representation, which I feel like I have not seen in a book before, and I thought it was very well done. And just there was so much female power and women power, and Harper is thrown into this situation that she did not ask for, but she decides to help them as best she can. I'm so excited to read the next 2 books in the series. One comes out in January, I believe, the 3rd book, but I've not read the 2nd book yet. But this is a phenomenal YA fantasy, hands down my favorite YA fantasy of the year. Right. Okay, we're getting into the top 5, which feels a little stressful. I don't know why that feels stressful. Oh my gosh. Okay, coming in at number 5 is a book that I also read in November, so if you watch my November wrap up, it'll be familiar to you, and that is The Gravity of Us by Phil Stamper. This book was just exactly, I feel like for me, I feel like favorite books happen because not only what is in the book and how the story is written, but also when they come into my life. Some of my all-time favorite books sometimes don't even have anything to do with the actual book, but just because it was like the exact right time to be reading that book. And I feel like that's what happened with The Gravity of Us. This book is charming and delightful, and the romance was just so sweet and cute. But this book also just filled me with so much hope. I read it during the middle of the election week. That was fun. And this book was just like, regardless of what happens, it's gonna be okay. Like, we're gonna keep on keeping on. And even though this book has nothing to do with the election or anything like that, but it was just so great. The Gravity of Us follows Cal, whose father is chosen to be an astronaut on a Mars mission, and his whole life is sort of uprooted, and he goes to Texas and starts to fall for one of the astronauts' sons, and it's just so cute and fun. And Phil has a book coming out in 2021, and you can bet I'm gonna read it. Maybe it'll be my top 2021 video. Wow, that was hard and weird. Alright, coming in at number 4 is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, which this book also I feel like caught me off guard. This book, Elizabeth writes in verse. I've read one of her other books and I really loved it. This one I actually listened to, and it follows two sisters who don't know each other exist and only find out about each other after their father goes down in a plane crash and dies. And Elizabeth actually narrated one of the voices of the sisters, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, this book is gripping and emotional. This book really goes into how different grief is for everyone and how it is so difficult to figure out how to keep going after the loss of somebody that you love, and then also dealing with this sort of surprise and shock that you have a sister that you didn't know existed, and that your father was leading this sort of double life. And it is beautiful and phenomenal. And I think that's how I've described like every book on this list, so sorry, I need to come up with better words, but truly this is a stunning YA novel, and I think it's just, oh, you'll cry. You'll cry, and you'll laugh, and you'll probably cry some more. So I highly recommend the audio because it was awesome, but I'm sure just reading it would be an incredible experience too, just because of how wonderful the story is and the storytelling is. It's just perfect. All right, coming in at number 3 for the year, a book that I've actually already read twice in 2020 is Happiness for Beginners by Catherine Center. I listened to the audio of Happiness for Beginners shortly after quarantine started, and everything was still in chaos and my anxiety was much higher than usual. And I just needed something that was like hopeful and happy, and I picked this up and I'm so glad I did. Catherine Center has a way of tackling harder subjects in a way that makes you feel full of like hope, and I want to say like full of resolve, that just knowing that no matter what happens you're gonna get through it, even though it doesn't feel like that most of the time when you're in those situations. But Happiness for Beginners follows Helen, who is a 31-year-old divorcee, and she's sort of having this like quarter life crisis, and she's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So she signs up for a 3-week-long hiking expedition, which is something that she's never done before at all in her life. And the day before she leaves for this trip, she finds out that her younger brother's best friend is also coming on this like hiking camping trip, and she's like, what the heck is happening? Why are you coming? But this book is sweet, and there's beautiful, lovely romance that I just love. It's one of my favorites. And this book, I feel like the title is, I mean, it's Happiness for Beginners, which I feel like to me feels like it's like a self-help book, which it's not, but I feel like you definitely learn a lot about life and happiness along the way as you follow all the characters and their 3-week expedition through the mountains. All the stars. Like I said, I already read it twice because I listened to it and then promptly ordered a copy, and a few months later I read it again. So take that for what you will, but it was phenomenal. Alright, if you follow me on Instagram, can you guess what my top 2 books of 2020 are? Maybe you can. If not, I will tell you. Coming in at number 2 for 2020 is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I am speechless. Okay, we're struggling. But seriously, I listened to the audio, which I 100% recommend doing first for this book. It is told in sort of like an interview style, and it follows all of the characters of this band, and as they tell their story of how they sort of came together and then why they like broke apart. And the audio is fantastic because it has a full cast, so every character has their own narration, has their own narrator. You'll 100% want Daisy Jones and the Six to like be an actual band when you finish it. You'll be like, why aren't these real people? How could I listen to their music? I will say this is an adult book. There is a lot of drugs, sex, rock and roll. That is just the world that we are in with Daisy Jones. But wow. It'll rip your heart out too. I like those kinds of books. That are just like so gritty and raw, and that is what this is. So, yep. And coming in at number 1, did you guess it? The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I'm holding 2 copies because I have 2. I'm gonna set one down. The Invisible Life of Addie Larue is quite possibly my favorite novel of all time. It has everything I like. There's a little bit of magic, and there's romance, and there's so much emotional... That's my description of this book. This book followed Addie, who in 1714 wishes and hopes for something more than the small village that she comes from, and she makes a deal with a god that she will essentially be able to live forever. But there's a small catch, and that is the fact that she will not be remembered, and that people will forget her as soon as they turn away from her. And she lives a very, I want to say like solitude life. It is a very lonely existence to be forgotten by everybody. But this jumps back and forth in the timeline of when she made this deal with this god, and then present day in 2014 of her living in New York City when she meets a man who remembers her. Oh, it's magical, and I love it, and it's the best thing I've ever read, so you should definitely read it. Alright, so those are my top 10 books of 2020. Let me know in the comments if you read any of these, if you liked any of these, if you loved any of these, and be sure to let me know also what your favorite books were this year so that I can add them to my ever-growing TBR. And yeah, I make bookish videos every single week, and so I will see you soon. Bye.